Assalamualaikum and hi to our lecturer, Sir Ahmad Fauzi. I hope you're doing well, sir. My name is Mashidayu Asnami. In this video, I'm going to present my final project paper, which is the household debt, labor force, and unemployment responses to the hike of the minimum wage in Malaysia. So as for the introduction, I'm going to give a brief overview of what is a minimum wage. So minimum wage in Malaysia came when a law was introduced to facilitate the implementation of the minimum wage, which started in the year 2013. So the minimum wage has been introduced to help workers to promote mobility in order to safeguard employees' rights and welfare through fair pay. So this table is the level of monthly minimum wage since 2013 until 2019. So it increases to 1,200 now. As for the problem statement, there are still many small and medium-sized firms are reluctant to pay the minimum wage as they are more reliant on low-wage labor. So there were some initial concerns even among firms that they were not initially ready to adopt the new minimum wage policy. So although previous researchers found no or minimal effect of the minimum wage policy on the unemployment rate, but the Department of Statistics Malaysia recorded an increasing rate of 0.4% of unemployment rate, meaning that in 2015 the unemployment rate is 3.1%, but it increased by 0.4% to 3.5% in October 2006. So the general objectives of this study is to investigate the impact of raising the national minimum wage policy toward the labor force, unemployment, and household debt in Malaysia. Specifically, the objectives of this paper were to, number one, to identify if there is a relationship between raising the minimum wage and household debt, and number two, to examine the relationships between unemployment level and labor market along with the hike of the minimum wage. So next is the significance of study. So the Malaysian government could use the findings to improve the implementation of minimum wage policies. And the findings may help the government to ensure it has achieved 2 out of the 4 minimum wage policy objectives. For the limitation of study, there are some unavoidable limitations to this research, but the study must be carried on so well. This research concluded with information covering the changes of the minimum wage from the very first year the policy had been implemented, which in 2013 until 2019. In 2020, there are changes again in the minimum wage. The minimum wage increased to 1,200 from 1,100. So for the year 2020, I did not obtain many data because they're not available. So it's limited to 2019 only. So this is the conceptual framework. The minimum wage is the dependent variable, and these three household debts, labor force, and unemployment rates are all independent variables in this study. So the literature review, various past researchers come up with different outcomes from their research. As for the household debt, a study by Agarwal and Chan in 2014, they conclude that the minimum wage has a negative relationship with household debt. And for the labor force, so the research done by Montenegro, Claudio, and Pages in 2004, they come up with their outcome that there is a positive relationship between minimum wage and labor force rate. Lastly, unemployment rate. So the study conducted by Newmark and Washer in 2011, they come up with a hypothesis stating that there is a positive relationship between the hike of minimum wage and unemployment rate. As minimum wage increase, so the unemployment rate will increase also. Next is data and methodology, the collection. So all data for this study were collected from secondary data only, and I used monthly data from January 2013 till December 2019. I obtained the data for minimum wage, labor force rate, and unemployment from Department of Statistic Malaysia. And as for the household debt, the data was collected from the Bank Negara Malaysia. And there are a total of 84 observations, and eViews Model 11 were being used to run all the data. This is the regression result. The purpose of this model is to analyze the probability that one explanatory variable may have an effect on the dependent variable. So based on this regression, the labor force rate and the unemployment rate are significant because they have dismissed the null hypothesis, while household debt has not dismissed the null hypothesis because it has not impacted by the raising of the minimum wage. And then the coefficient for household debt is negative 0.004656, which means it has negative impact on the hike of minimum wage. If minimum wage increase, so the household debt will decrease. Meanwhile, the coefficient of both labor force rate and unemployment rate shows a positive sign, which means variable move in the same direction as the hike of the minimum wage. In this study, we can see that the p-value for labor force rate is 0.000 and the null hypothesis is rejected, which means the labor force rate significant to probability at 5% of significant level. So the probability for unemployment rate is 0.007. So the null hypothesis is rejected also at 5% of significant level, which explains that unemployment rate is significant. So this shows there is a positive relationship between unemployment rate and the hike of the minimum wage. Okay, next, this is the correlation test result. The correlation matrix could be used to decide whether the relationship between the two variables is positive, negative, or no relationship at all. So the aim of this correlation test is to know the presence of the multicollinearity. So from the table, the correlation between all the variables is close to 1.0, especially the labor force rate and unemployment rate. So it means that there is a strong correlation with the increasing of the minimum wage. So this is the multicollinearity result. In determining the existence of multicollinearity, if the VIF is equal to 1, so the suggestion is that there is no multicollinearity. If the VIF is more than 1, independent variables is interrelate with each other, and therefore multicollinearity shall exist. The result below shows the centered VIF for all variables is less than 10. So the indication is the data does not have any multicollinear test. Next is this is the heterosedasticity test. So from this table, the probability of chi-square is 0.0012 since the value is less than the significant level of 0.05. Then reject the null hypothesis since there is no heterosedasticity occurs. So based on the outcome of all tests, it can be concluded that household debt does not have a significant impact on the increase in the minimum wage. So in the meantime, the changes in minimum wage in Malaysia had a significant impact on both variables in terms of labor force rate and unemployment rate. So these are the hypotheses, three hypotheses. So the hypothesis 1, null hypothesis, there is no relationship between minimum wage and household debt. the alternative hypothesis, there is a relationship between minimum wage and household debt. So it shows a sign of insignificant data. So we failed to reject the null hypothesis. The relationship is negative. So hypothesis two, it is significant and having a positive relationship to dependent variable. So we reject the null hypothesis. And hypothesis three, but the minimum wage and unemployment rate. So we reject the null hypothesis because data is also significant and the relationship is positive. And lastly, the conclusion and recommendation. So to wrap it all, the raising of minimum wage gives significant effect to the employment level in a country. So in employers' perspective, they would lay off workers because many business not adhere to the minimum wage order. So as a consequence, the unemployment rate will keep on increasing. And the recommendation for future research, the future research could explore how the minimum wage policies impacted employee work behaviors and levels of satisfaction, as this would create an opportunity to educate policymakers as to how to improve the minimum wage policies even better. So furthermore, the Central Bank of Malaysia in 2013, they forecasted that perhaps the implementation of the minimum wage policy will indeed strengthen the Malaysian economy. So future research could therefore analyze impact of the implementation of the minimum wage policy on the financial performance of an organization. So that is all from me. Thank you for watching and have a great day.